Darkness stretches beyond the veil of known space, a silence so complete it strangles the mind. In the vast infinity between galaxies, where even light hesitates, something stirs. It is ancient. It is vast. It is waiting. The Galactic Accord, a union of 27 advanced species, prides itself on logic, science, and reason. For nearly 1,000 years, they have mapped the cosmic dance of gravity and time, securing an equilibrium of knowledge and power. But when the first wave of dreams comes, science fails them. The station Tarsis Prime, a monolithic construct of steel and glass, floating in the neutral void between civilizations, becomes the first to report anomalies. At first, they are dismissed as an issue of stress, a common affliction among species that spend too much time in deep space. But soon, diplomats and scholars, warriors and engineers, begin waking in the dead of their rest cycles, clutching at themselves, trembling with something they cannot name. The dreams are not visions, not simple images flickering through unconscious minds. They are invasions. They do not simply show, they impress, inscribe, carve their meaning into the psyche of those who dare to sleep. And worst of all, there is no common understanding. Each species, from the logic-bound Zaireth to the crystalline minds of the Aetari, sees nothing but chaos, images that their brains refuse to comprehend. All except one. The humans begin to speak. Their voices, shaking but certain, whisper the same words. It's speaking. It is Dr. Elias Vance who first understands the weight of this revelation. Linguist, cognitive scientist, and one of the few humans granted unrestricted access to the Accord's deepest research facilities, he has spent his career proving that human perception is unique. That, unlike other species who evolved within singular lines of rationality, humans thrive in paradox. They do not reject nightmares, they interpret them. He sits alone in the sterile chambers of the Accord's diplomatic wing, staring at his trembling hands, replaying the dream in his mind. A sky torn open, revealing something beneath reality itself. A city stretching into infinity, flickering between existence and oblivion. A voice, not heard, but felt, pressing into his thoughts like the pressure of deep water. And symbols, written in something that was never meant to be read, threading through his mind like vines wrapping around bone. He knows with a certainty deeper than logic that this is not a dream. It is a message. When he presents his findings to the Accord, he is met with skepticism. The Aetari, a species whose minds operate in synchronized hive thought, dismiss his claims outright. The Var'ka, reptilian warriors who have waged war across dying stars, scoff at the notion of an entity that speaks in riddles rather than strength. Even the Zaireth, the Accord's foremost thinkers, argue that if the message is incomprehensible to the finest minds in the galaxy, then it is simply nonsense. But Elias stands firm. He argues that human cognition is different. Where other species rely on linear perception, humans navigate contradictions, embrace uncertainty, and find meaning in chaos. That is why, of all the minds in the universe, only they can hear the Void Herald's voice. The revelation is uncomfortable. The Accord does not like outliers. They prefer the neat, structured evolution of species that fit within their grand equation of the cosmos. To suggest that humanity is uniquely suited to deciphering an unknown cosmic force is borderline heresy. But then the second wave of dreams arrives. This time the nightmares do not simply whisper, they scream. Tarsis Prime's communication grid fractures under the strain. Energy pulses ripple through subspace, disrupting entire planetary networks. Ships caught in transit experience time dilation distortions, their clocks jumping forward and backward as though the universe itself is momentarily forgetting them. Panic spreads through the Accord like fire in oxygen-rich air. Scientists and philosophers scramble for explanations, but the one truth remains. Only the humans understand. The Accord cannot ignore it any longer. A summons is issued. The highest council of the 27 species gathers in the Great Void chamber, where decisions shaping the fate of civilizations are made. Elias is ordered to speak. He stands before them beneath the glow of the cosmic map that traces the movements of stars and worlds, and he tells them what he knows. This is not an accident, he says. Something ancient is speaking to us. And whatever it is, it chose humanity to listen. His voice carries through the chamber weighted with certainty. The representatives of the Accord do not speak, do not interrupt. They listen, because they, for all their arrogance, fear the unknown. And for the first time in recorded history, the unknown has chosen humans as its heralds. But the question remains. Why? The void chamber remains silent long after Elias's words have HFY, expressions unreadable to human eyes. In the air, the tension is thick, electric. Some are uneasy, others resentful, and yet none deny the truth. The humans hear something that no other species can. The Aetari, their minds linked and synchronized, thought are the first to break the silence. This is a human delusion, they murmur in perfect unison, their 6 eyes blinking in synchronized distrust. You seek meaning in entropy, as your species always has. We see no order, no intent. The Void Herald speaks only in madness. Elias straightens, jaw tight. His hands tremble, not from fear, but from the lingering aftershock of the nightmare still pressing against his mind. The words of the Aetari sting, but they do not shake him. He has spent his life arguing against species that view humanity as an anomaly, one that does not fit neatly into their framework of understanding. He lets out a slow breath. His voice is steady when he speaks. That is exactly why you cannot hear it. His words ripple through the chamber like a sharp intake of breath. Your minds are bound to structure, to logic that demands clarity. You reject contradictions. You erase what does not fit. But humans? He lets his gaze sweep across them, meeting the unreadable stares of the Accord's most powerful minds. We don't erase paradox. We live with it. We dream in it. We thrive in it. For a long moment, there is nothing but silence. Then, from the shadows at the far end of the chamber, a new voice speaks. Cold, measured, dangerous. The Var'ka warlord, towering and covered in the obsidian plates of his kind, leans forward, his razor-edged teeth gleaming under the chamber's pale light. And what of the dreams human? His voice is a growl, low and edged with skepticism. What does your cursed mind claim to hear? Elias swallows. He does not need to recall the dream. The images are burned into him. A warning. A murmur spreads through the chamber. The Aetari diplomats, beings of crystalline form and light, shift uneasily, their forms dimming in apprehension. The Zaireth scholars whisper among themselves in their cold, analytical tongues. Elias continues. The Void Herald was once something else, not a creature, not a machine, but a civilization. It did not die. It was consumed, erased so completely that not even memory remains. It exists only as an echo, a fragment clinging to the edges of oblivion. It sends these dreams because it knows something else is coming. A cold weight settles over the room. Elias sees the skepticism in their faces, but beneath it he sees something else. Fear. It is the Aetari emissary who finally speaks, her voice like a chime of glass breaking in still air. If what you say is true, then what remains of this Void Herald wishes to warn us? Elias nods. Not just warn. It is trying to teach us how to fight. The weight in the room shifts. Fear is replaced by something sharper. Doubt, caution, resistance. The Aetari counselors shake their heads, their translucent skin darkening in disapproval. We cannot act on human delusions, one of them states. You ask us to believe that something beyond the fabric of reality chose you alone to carry this message? It is absurd, the warlord snarls in agreement. Humans are known for manipulation. What better way to seize influence than to declare yourselves the chosen interpreters of a cosmic mystery? The accusation is sharp, but Elias does not flinch. He expected this. What he did not expect was the wave of pain that crashes through his skull. A heartbeat later, the chamber vanishes. For a moment he is nowhere, and then the void opens before him. The sky is wrong, shifting and endless, a place where light should not exist yet somehow does. A vast city stretches into infinity, its towers flickering between existence and dissolution. In the distance, something moves, something too vast to comprehend, shifting in the cracks of time itself. And then, the voice. Not words, not sound. Wait, a presence, a message that does not speak but presses into his very soul. Remember. Pain sears through him. The vision shatters. Elias crashes to the chamber floor, gasping, drenched in cold sweat. The silence that follows is deafening. He looks up, into the faces of the gathered representatives, and he knows. They saw it too, not the full force of it, not the voice that clawed its way into his thoughts. But they saw the flicker, the shadow, of something vast and hungry, something coming. For the first time the Accord is silent. Then the Zaireth elder speaks. Where did you see this? Elias swallows, his voice hoarse. A place that shouldn't exist. A pause. Coordinates? A slow nod. A single string of numbers, burned into his mind. The Aetari emissary exhales, her crystalline form flickering between shades of apprehension. Then we must see for ourselves. For the first time in their history, the Accord prepares to send a delegation into the unknown. For the first time, humanity leads the way. The coordinates hang in the air like a death sentence. The Aetari emissary moves carefully beside him, her crystalline form pulsing with strange resonance. This world is not abandoned, she says, voice distant. It is trapped. They step forward, into the ruins, into the shifting remnants of a city that remembers being alive, and then a flicker, a pulse of something vast, and they see them, not ghosts, not visions, fragments, beings half-formed, flickering between existence and nothingness. Faces frozen in expressions of horror, mouths open in silent screams that have no sound. Their bodies shift, phasing between moments of life and erasure, trapped in the instant of their annihilation. Elias staggers back. The weight of the vision slams into his skull. This, he chokes on the words. This is what the Void Herald is trying to warn us about. The Aetari emissary shudders, her crystalline body pulsing erratically. No, she whispers. This is what it used to be. The realization hits like ice. The Void Herald was once like them. A civilization caught in the moment of its unmaking. A species, devoured by something that leaves no trace, no memory, no history, and it is still happening. Elias turns, heart hammering. We need to leave, now. But before they can move, the shadows ripple, a presence unfolds, and the Void Herald speaks, not in words, not in language, but in absolute certainty. A single truth pressed into their minds with the weight of a collapsing universe. The null tide is coming, and the last remnants of a forgotten world begin to vanish. The ruins collapse as they run. The air shudders, breaking apart, unraveling as if reality itself is being pulled apart at the seams. The Aetari screams, oh, high keening sound as her crystalline body flickers in and out of solidity. The Var'ka warlord roars, his massive form staggering beneath the force of something unseen, something pulling at him. Elias forces himself forward. The Void Herald does not follow. It does not need to. Its warning has already been given. They barely make it back to the ship. Before the planet vanishes completely, a world erased, a memory unmade, and in the endless void of space, the message lingers. The null tide is coming. Elias grips the ship's console as they jump to light speed, leaving the graveyard of an unremembered species behind. His breath is ragged. His mind is burning. He knows, without doubt, that what they have seen is only the beginning. The Accord will not believe them, not at first, but when the next world vanishes, they will have no choice. They saw it. The flicker, the impossibility of what lurks in the void. And despite their logic, their arrogance, their belief that the universe is shaped by reason, they are afraid. Then, the Var'ka warlord laughs, a deep, rumbling sound that is not amusement but something darker. A sound like a blade being drawn in the dark. "You would have us fly into the mouth of oblivion," he growls, his scaled hands curling into fists. "Based on a human's vision. A challenge. A test of resolve." Elias meets his stare and does not look away. "Not just my vision," he says, voice steady. "Yours too." The warlord's golden eyes narrow. The Aetari emissary shifts in her crystalline form. "If we do not investigate, the dreams will not stop," she says, her voice like brittle glass. "We cannot dismiss this as coincidence any longer." The Aetari counselors exchange a private pulse of linked thought. Then, coldly, they speak. "If we go," they say, "we go prepared for war." No one disagrees. The expedition vessel is unlike any that has come before. It is a hybrid creation, fused from the finest technology of the Accord's greatest civilizations, and commanded by humans. A warship wrapped in the skin of a science vessel, a creation meant to step beyond the borders of what is known and return. Elias stands on the bridge as they approach the edge of the unnamed system. The coordinates burned into his mind are now real, plotted in cold light across the navigational charts. And yet, as they draw closer, the ship's instruments begin to fail. A pulse, a distortion. Reality bends around them. The Var'ka navigator snarls, slamming his clawed hands against the controls. Impossible. The space is shifting, like it is alive. Elias watches the screen as the star charts flicker, entire planets blinking, in and out of existence as if they are being rewritten moment by moment. The Aetari scientists whisper among themselves, their crystalline forms dimming in unease. "There should be nothing here," one of them murmurs. And yet, there is a planet. And there it is, emerging from the abyss like a wound in space, a planet that should not exist, twisted, half-erased, a sphere of flickering light and shadow, phasing between what was and what is no longer. The ruins of a world trapped between states of being. Elias breathes in slowly, feeling the cold sweat on his skin. He turns to the Var'ka warlord. "Prepare a landing team." No one speaks. There is no need. The silence says enough. They are walking into something beyond knowledge, beyond history. And the void herald is waiting. The air on the planet should not exist, yet it does. A thin, hollow atmosphere clings to the bones of a dead civilization. The landing team steps forward, their figures lost in the strange, flickering half-light of a sun that does not fully shine. The ruins stretch into the distance, ancient towers, crumbling under the weight of an erasure that is still happening. Walls dissolve into dust, reform, then vanish again as if time itself is uncertain of their place in reality, and the shadows whisper. Elias grips his weapon tighter, though he knows it will be useless against whatever lingers here. The Void Herald speaks in nightmares, and only humans are left to understand the cost of ignoring them. The stars stretched before them, infinite and cold, as the ship surged through the void. The planet was gone, erased as though it had never been. Yet the weight of its absence pressed against the minds of the crew. No one spoke. No one dared to. Elias gripped the railing of the command deck, knuckles white. The message burned in his skull, a warning that was not a warning, but a certainty. The null tide is coming. He forced himself to breathe, forced himself to push through, the residual pressure of the vision still clawing at his mind. The others were shaken, but he had seen more. He had felt the Void Herald's final transmission deeper than the rest. It had not just been a message, it had been a choice. And he understood, with a certainty that made his bones ache, that the Accord was not ready for what was coming. A sharp tone cut through the silence. Incoming transmission. The Aetari emissary lifted her crystalline head, her light flickering with unreadable emotion. The Accord was calling. They had felt the loss of the world. Even without understanding, the shockwave of its erasure had sent ripples through subspace. Elias exhaled sharply. Put them through. The void chamber materialized before him in shimmering light. The council gathered once more in all their cold authority. But this time their arrogance was tempered by something sharper. Fear. The Aetari spoke first, their synchronized voices carefully measured. We detected an anomaly. The system is gone. There is no record of it ever existing. Elias met their gaze, his mind heavy with exhaustion, because it was erased. Silence. Then, the Var'ka warlord, eyes gleaming with barely contained fury. You will explain. Elias felt the weight of the moment pressing against him. He had their attention now. We found ruins, he said. A civilization that was already caught, in the process of erasure. It was trying to hold on, trying to warn us, but it was too late. The Void Herald is the last remnant of something that was erased by the null tide. And whatever did this, he exhaled. It is coming again. A murmur of unease swept through the chamber. The Aetari emissary, still recovering from the sheer force of the vision, spoke softly. This is not an enemy we can fight. The Var'ka slammed a fist against the table. All things can be fought. Elias shook his head. Not this. He took a step forward, feeling the weight of their expectations. The null tide is not a fleet. It is not an empire. It is something fundamental to the nature of existence. It does not conquer, it does not destroy. It simply unmakes. The Aetari's expressions darkened. Then we must prepare to flee. Elias laughed, a short, bitter sound. Flee where? He snapped. How do you run from something that erases history itself? How do you escape something that devours the memory of your existence? They had no answer, because there was no answer. A heavy silence settled, thick and suffocating, the weight of what they faced finally settling upon the Accord's greatest minds. But Elias was not done, because there was still one last truth. He lifted his gaze, voice unwavering. The Void Herald didn't just warn us. Eyes turned to him. It gave us a way out. The Aetari emissary tensed. Explain. Elias exhaled. It's not just a warning. It's a blueprint. A message buried within the dreams. The Void Herald was the last survivor of its kind, but it learned something before it was erased. A way to disrupt the null tide. The Var'ka warlord's eyes burned. Then we must act. What must be done? Elias hesitated, because he knew the cost. The Void Herald had shown him the Accord would never accept it. We have to break reality. A sharp intake of breath. The Aetari's eyes darkened. You speak in riddles. Elias forced himself to continue. The null tide follows order, structure. It exists within the framework of cause and effect. It devours history, rewriting the fabric of time itself. But humans, we have always lived with contradiction. We survive through paradox, through contradictions that other species reject. He clenched his fists. That's why we're the only ones who can hear the Void Herald. The realization settled like a funeral bell. The Aetari emissary whispered, her crystalline body flickering. We must introduce a paradox so vast that the null tide cannot process it. Elias nodded. We have to make it forget how to erase us. A stunned silence followed. You changed something fundamental in the fabric of reality. We survived, Elias corrected. And that is what you cannot accept. It hung in the air between them. The truth. The Accord could not erase what had been done. They could not deny that humanity had broken the laws of existence itself, and that terrified them. The Var'ka warlord leaned forward, his voice a low growl. You humans did what none of us could. You shaped the void to your will. And that means one thing. Elias met his gaze. It means you cannot control us anymore. The Var'ka bared his teeth. Not in anger, in acknowledgement. The Aetari emissary turned away, her light dimming. The Aetari remained silent. And Elias knew in that moment that humanity had just outgrown the Accord. The message came a day later, a formal decree, carefully worded, diplomatic. The Accord acknowledges humanity's unique role in recent events. However, given the unpredictable nature of human actions and the profound implications of their cognitive divergence, it has been decided that the species known as human shall operate under self-governance outside the formal structure of the Accord. Exile. Not by force, not by decree, but by fear. They were no longer trusted, no longer seen as equals. They were something else now. Elias read the words in silence. He had known it was coming, but seeing it in writing made it real. They had broken reality to save the galaxy, and the galaxy would rather forget them than understand them. The transmission arrived on a secure human channel, long after the Accord had fallen silent. A single burst of encrypted data, carrying a voice Elias did not expect to hear again. The Aetari emissary. I do not agree with the Accord's decision. Her voice was strained, uncertain. I do not think we should fear what we do not understand. But I am in the minority. The others, they cannot comprehend what has happened. They choose to distance themselves rather than face the truth. A pause. I do not believe this is the end. Elias exhaled, closing his eyes. No, it was not. The null tide was still out there, waiting, watching, and when it came again, when another world was on the verge of erasure, it would not be the Accord that faced it. It would be the only species that understood nightmares, the ones who refused to be erased. The stars stretched out beyond Tarsis Prime, but this time, Elias didn't look to them with wonder. They had been his home, his cradle of ambition, a place of order and structure. Now they were silent witnesses to what he had known all along. Humanity had been cast out, exiled from the very fabric of the galaxy they had fought to protect. He stood on the observation deck, hands pressed against the cool glass, staring out at the universe. The universe that should have been theirs to explore. The universe that had once looked to humanity as a curiosity. Now it looked away. Behind him, the hum of the ship was steady, predictable. But he was not. Elias could feel the tension between the humans on the ship, the unease of their exile. The peace they had won was fragile, the knowledge they carried dangerous. But they had done it. They had defied reality itself, rewritten the rules of existence. The humans no longer lived in the shadow of the Accord. They were free, but not in the way they had hoped. A soft chime broke his thoughts. A transmission. Elias turned, eyes narrowing. He didn't expect to hear from the Accord again. And yet, there it was. A call that carried weight in its silence. He opened it. Elias. The voice of the Aetari emissary, soft, yet unmistakable. I have been watching the data streams. Her voice flickered as though she were holding something back. I believe you are right. Humanity was not meant to be controlled. Elias exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure if he felt relief or dread at her words. She wasn't speaking for the Accord. She was speaking for herself. I will speak to the others. I will ask them to reconsider. The null tide will return, and next time, we may not have the luxury of time. She paused. But if you need help... The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only the hum of the ship in the quiet aftermath. Elias didn't know whether to hope or fear. He had learned the true meaning of isolation, of betrayal. Even the Aetari, the ones who had shown him trust, now stood on the edge of a dangerous divide. He turned back to the stars, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down. The null tide was coming. But now, humanity stood alone, no longer confined by the rules of the Accord, no longer bound by the will of those who refused to understand. They would face the next storm on their terms. And when the universe forgot them again, it would be their defiance that would define them, because humanity had broken the rules of reality once, and they would do it again. For the universe had learned one thing: when humans are chosen to face the unknown, they break it.